Now these videos usually have some kind of big long introduction and you just want to get down to those top 10 tips. So we'll keep it nice and short, nice and sweet, and we'll jump straight in. So you'll be able to see that I'm running my current Twitch save, which is Gloucester City. We got promoted last season on the first try, and as you can see now, we're top of the league with not much left to go. I'd like to think we're probably going to walk it, but stranger things have happened. So I'm going to pretty much give you a step-by-step guide about what I did as soon as I started this save, and probably what I do whenever I start a lower league save. And rule number one is choose a formation and stick with that formation. And that includes roles, support and attack. Just don't be reactive. Just go with what you want to play. It's your team at the end of the day. And what you'll find then is it usually only takes probably the first 10 games, including a good pre-season, for your team to kind of get the tactical familiarity with that as well. And once they've got that tactical familiarity, providing you've got the players who fit those roles, you'll notice results. You can have a mid-table team, but as long as they're familiar with what you've got going on, then you should be relatively successful straight off the bat. And that leads us nicely on to point number 2, which is make sure your players are training in those positions and roles. Now, this is probably only the case if they're not totally familiar with those roles and those positions. We had a player last season who he can play right midfield, but we don't play midfielders. I'll show you my tactics now. We play wingers. He was a cracking right midfielder, and we put him up and we played him constantly in that position, and we made sure he was training in there. And by halfway through the season, he was up from a 3-star all the way to a 4-star right winger. Unfortunately, he did get nabbed from us and we sold him. But just from making sure that those training, and it doesn't take long to do. I don't tend to mess around with training. If I've got a player I really like, I might try and give him some kind of trait, but usually I just let them crack on, but they must be playing in the correct position. And again, if you tend to play a player out of position and you're going to be playing there for most of his career at your club, move him over there in training as well and try and play him as much as possible in that position. And top tip number 3 is friendlies for money. So if you're lazy like me, you like to get your assistant manager to do your friendlies for you, happy days. But have a little look through and see how much money you're getting for those pre-season friendlies, because a lot of the time, if you're playing away, you're actually not getting anything. Yes, you're getting experience for your players and you're getting fitness for your players, but why not make it that you get a bit of money as well? And in these lower league saves, even if you're getting 3, 4, 5 grand from a friendly, it's going to add up if you play 5, 6 friendlies at the beginning of the season. Tip number 4 is affiliates. So these can be affiliate clubs or senior affiliates. When I came into Gloucester, they had an affiliation with Cheltenham. Fantastic. They're in a higher division than us. In fact, they were 2 divisions above us, as were Forest Green Rovers. Forest Green didn't give us anything for having the affiliation, so get rid of them. If they're not giving you anything, get rid of them and then have your board look for more suitable partners. And what the senior affiliate does for you is they'll loan you their younger players or their weaker players, and 9 times out of 10 it will be for no money as well. You might be able to get the pre-season friendlies as well, and again, if you end up getting a big club there, that's a lot of money, and usually they're quite local as well, so crowds do tend to flock towards those games even for pre-season, so you tend to get a bit more money for those as well. Lower affiliations are great if you've got players you physically can't get rid of. So if a player's got the hump, or it's a younger player who has a good potential ability but no suitors, send them straight off to that affiliate and get them playing and help bring those youth players through. And tip number 5 does actually tend to go into that affiliate, because you can get those loan players for usually no money. But the next tip is have a look at loans for little/no money. And what loans are good for in this game and Football Manager 20 is fill in the gaps in your team. So chances are you're probably not going to get a world-class player on loan, although as you can see from my screen here, my top player and top goal scorer is actually a loan player. If you can get them in, fantastic, but keep your players sweet by using those loan players to come in and fill the gaps. Yes, you'll probably annoy a few managers in the Football League, but to date I've not had any managers turn around to me who I've annoyed in the past say you can't have this player. It might be different for other people, it might be different on different saves, but so far so good for me on this version of Football Manager. And that way you just end up keeping your players a little bit sweeter. There's nothing worse than a player kicking off or a player that's on good money, not wanting to play. And if you're anything like me, it'll be someone who's been out injured for 5 or 6 months, complain about game time. The game does try and screw you over a little bit, so it's a kind of a good way of getting back in. And as you can see, my bench is filled with three lone players, and we've got our lone player playing at left back, who's actually rotating with my first team left back at the moment. So a good way of keeping that rotation system going. And you can have up to 6 long term a season. I think it's something silly like 12 short term. Don't quote me on that though. Tip number 6, if you're anything like me and you're either not familiar with the newer versions of this game or you skipped a few in between, so I don't think I played 15, 16, 17 maybe. The Director of Football is a fantastic way of bringing to your attention some good players. Don't get me wrong, they're not always fantastic, but also if you're in a rush like me, I don't particularly enjoy scrolling through shortlist after shortlist, trying to go through players, because it's a stab in the dark when you end of the season, you click players who are out of contract and then just go ahead and look. It's a stab in the dark, whereas these tend to filter out the better ones, and you can do it so you're searching for position and their role as well, which is really helpful. And they normally bring you 2 or 3 half decent suggestions, and it kind of gives you a good idea of what kind of players you need to be looking for, because it doesn't give you any particular unrealistic suggestions. So I've always found that quite good, and it's something I may have missed in the earlier years, but it's something I've used on this save, on previous non-league games, and a lot in Football Manager 20 as well. Number 7 is address those players on high wages early doors. When you first get to your club, have a look and think, right, is this player going to play? If they're not going to play 75% of games, get them out. If they're on high wages, get them out. There's no love lost for non-league football. The staff turnaround is so high, and you can kind of get away with it with the other teams not being particularly strong. Whereas in some of the older games, if you rotated your squads, so I think this season we've had 38 in, 24 out. Any other Football Manager apart from maybe this one and 20, the teams have really struggled. Whereas this time round, I found if you leave the tactics the same, the formation the same, the roles, the responsibilities all the same, it doesn't matter who you get in and out. So you can afford to upset people. I've brought people in at the beginning of this season who haven't even made it to the first day of the new season, because they're either complaining about me not being able to bring any quality players in, or not being able to bring any quality staff in, or they've not been playing friendlies and they've been promised first team football. So don't be afraid to get rid of those players, because there's always going to be other players that you can pick up. And ways to do this are, again, get your Director of Football on it. Not always the easiest thing to do, and they tend to be a bit naff in the lower divisions, but just keep offering those players out. If you're anything like me, my third choice goalkeeper was on £650 a week, which at non-league level, tier 6 I think it was, is ridiculous. So to get him out, you offer him out on transfer, on free transfer, even if he's got some kind of value, take the hit on the value, get him out of the club, free him up from the wages. If not, loan him out, see if you can get full wages. If not, just keep coming down that sliding scale and get as much off the books as you possibly can. Failing that, do the maths, and is it worth releasing him? The board might not like it, especially if it's at the beginning of the season, but in the long run, if it's going to save you money, I would recommend you go for it. Tip number 8 is trials. If you're anything like my clubs, the scouting network is terrible. The scouts take so long to come back, and when they do, they come back about 18%, 20% scouted, and you kind of have to take a stab in the dark at that. And all the meanwhile, it's costing you money as well and time. Get them in on trial, set it for 4 weeks, and then by about week 2, you should have pretty much all their stats ready to go and you can make an informed decision. Also, when players come in on trial as well, they get a quick little scout report or a coach's report. That kind of gives you a good indication. It's not always perfect, but it usually kind of sends you on the right path, and using both of those methods together should give you a good indication of whether you want to keep that player at the club or not past its trial. And that leads us into point number 9, which is the kind of holy grail of all trials, and it's the England Trialist Day. I would say alongside this, you've got the emails you get with some of the bigger youth team players being released. So using that and that England Trial Day, it should pretty much give you every player you need, really, if I'm totally honest. I do it a lot and just kind of kit my team out with all of these Premier League youngsters coming through, because 9 times out of 10 they're actually better than what I've already got. And again, as we mentioned earlier, there's no love lost when it comes to non-league football. You've got to be cruel to be kind and get rid of those players you know aren't going to play anymore. This is one of those times where you might have to sacrifice trying to get trials in because they're going to be hot property. And especially when you get the email come through saying that these contracts are going to expire in 3 months or a month's time, they're probably going to be hot property and they're probably going to be wanted by a few other teams. So if you're anything like me, you'll be tempted to take a stab in the dark at some of these players. They will want high wages, but again, 9 times out of 10, it's worth it. And for those who aren't, don't be afraid to show them the door in the next couple of months. Because if they come in and they don't have a higher standing in the hierarchy of your team, they're pretty easy to get rid of, and you might turn a bit of profit on them as well. And number 10 is going to be one of those ones that it's easier said than done, but cup runs. So if you're anything like me, I'm not a huge fan of the cups, and when I'm playing either in the Prem or I've got a kind of championship side, if I'm busy in a season in the league, I don't tend to give the cups too much notice. If I'm at a club that's financially stable, I'm not too bothered by it. I'd rather keep my squad nice and fit, and if I'm going for something like playoffs or promotion or trying not to get relegated, then the cup definitely takes a back seat. However, in the lower leagues, in non-league football, if you can get into that FA Cup first round, there's always a chance that you can sort your whole season out with one game. Okay, it can be quite rare, and I've only done it a few times, but it does seriously help, especially if you don't get promoted in a season. If you've got that money from the cup run, so either from prize money or getting a good away result, it does tend to make the season well worthwhile. So my advice is always, especially FA Cup, definitely go for it, give everything in that. And FA Trophy, if you're having a kind of naff season, you're mid-table and you've got nothing else to play for, definitely go for it. Or if you've been like me the last 2 seasons where you've been kind of top, we're 10 points clear at the moment, we've got kind of resources to throw at it, so let's rest some of our players during the league games and go out and play our best 11 in these FA Trophy games. You do get quite a surprisingly large amount of reward money for winning. So I think I'm in the 4th round at the moment. I think we got £7,000 just for winning a game of football last time. Again, if you get drawn at home as well, it's more gate receipts coming in too. So well worth keeping an eye on those cup runs. So short and sweet today. If I'm honest, I've probably got about 20, 30, 40 top tips for you. So if you want to know anything else, do drop me a comment, do get in touch on socials. And if you want to see where our Gloucester team ends up this season, come and check me out on Twitch as well. Thank you so much for tuning in, and see you on the next episode.